The desert stretched beyond sight. It was a place of gray dust and quiet wind, where old metal bones of ships lay half buried in the ground. The planet Tirish had once been home to a great empire, but now it stood still and lifeless. Not even birds or insects dared to live here. Only the sound of shifting sand broke the silence. A small human shuttle fell through the sky. The hull burned red as it passed through thin clouds, and then with a burst of steam it hit the surface. The crash echoed through the empty valley. Inside the broken shuttle, a single man stirred. His name was Ryan. He was an explorer and a rescue pilot sent by the Human Union to search for any signs of life left on Tirash. His team had received weak energy signals from deep beneath the surface, something that looked like an active power source. But as they entered the atmosphere, a magnetic storm struck. Ryan's shuttle was separated from the main ship and forced to land alone. He sat in the wreckage for a while, catching his breath. The cabin was full of smoke and sparks, but he was alive. His helmet visor flickered, showing warnings in red letters. He tapped the side of his wrist display and the readings settled. Oxygen was low but stable. Outside temperature was cold enough to freeze water. Radiation was low. He could survive for a few days if he managed his supplies well. Ryan took a deep breath, stood up, and looked through the cracked window. The world outside looked like a battlefield frozen in time. Pieces of broken towers jutted out of the sand. Strange crystal shapes glowed faintly beneath layers of dust. The sky was dull silver with no sign of a sun, only a soft light that never changed. He spoke softly through his comm. "This is Ryan, Shuttle 4. I made it down." "Reading you?" Only static answered. The storm had killed the signal. He was completely alone. Ryan adjusted his gear, packed what he could carry, and stepped outside. The wind brushed across his visor with a dry hiss. His boots sank into the soft dust. Every few steps he found pieces of old alien machines, beautiful curved structures made of crystal and metal that shimmered faintly, as if remembering their old power. He wondered what kind of beings had built this world. He had seen their ruins before, studied their art and weapons in the museum on Mars, but seeing the remains up close was different. Here their greatness felt heavy, almost sad. He walked for hours. The coordinates on his wrist display guided him toward the source of the signal. As the light dimmed, he reached the mouth of a deep crater. At the bottom, hidden among rocks, stood a black structure half buried in the ground. It looked like a doorway with no door, framed by tall shards of glassy stone. Strange carvings ran along its surface, glowing faintly blue. Ryan paused. The readings were stronger now, steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. He felt a mix of excitement and fear. Something alive could be down there. He set up a small beacon to mark his position, then began to climb down. The air grew cooler and thicker as he descended. The walls of the crater shimmered faintly, reflecting his helmet light like tiny stars. At the bottom, he found an opening leading into a tunnel. It was wide enough for a large creature to walk through. Rion hesitated only for a second, then stepped inside. The tunnel stretched deep underground. The floor was smooth and strange plants grew along the walls, thin glowing vines that moved slightly as if breathing. The air smelled metallic but not foul. The deeper he went, the more he felt like he was walking into something ancient and sacred. After what felt like an hour, he reached a wide chamber. In the center stood a circular platform made of crystal. Above it, soft blue light pulsed gently, casting long shadows across the floor. Machines of unknown design surrounded the platform. Silent, covered in dust, but still functional. On the platform lay a small object covered by a transparent shell. Ryan walked closer and stopped. Inside the shell was a child. The child was not human. Its skin was pale with faint silver lines, and its eyes were closed, as if sleeping. The shell emitted a slow hum, and every few seconds the child's chest rose slightly. Ryan's scanner identified life signs, weak but present. The machine keeping the child alive was running on minimal power. Ryan felt his heart race. This was not just an artifact. It was a living being, a survivor. He placed his hand on the shell and felt the faint vibration of life. The machine responded to his touch. A small screen flickered to life beside it, showing alien symbols. Ryan did not understand the language, but he guessed what it meant. This was a stasis pod. The child was in deep sleep, protected for centuries. He opened his comm again, forgetting for a moment that it was dead. "Command, this is Ryan. I found something. A life form, young, possibly native." Silence again. He sighed, crouched beside the pod and studied the controls. The energy source was failing. If he didn't act, the child might not survive much longer. He knew the rule, never touch unknown tech, but this was not a weapon or a trap. It was a life. He reached for his pack and pulled out a portable energy cell. Using a connection cable, he attached it to the pod's damaged power line. The lights grew brighter and the hum became steadier. The readings on his scanner improved. The child's breathing grew stronger. Rian smiled faintly. "You're going to be all right," he said quietly. The words echoed softly in the empty chamber. For a moment, he thought he saw movement in the child's fingers. It was a small twitch, barely noticeable. He leaned closer, eyes wide with wonder. He imagined what this child's world had looked like before the fall, cities of light, people of grace and knowledge. And now, after all that destruction, this child might be the last of its kind. He stayed beside the pod for a long time, listening to the quiet hum. The tunnel lights flickered, then stabilized again. Ryan checked his oxygen and supplies. He could last 2 more days, maybe 3. He decided to rest for the night near the pod. He cleared a spot, set up a small thermal tent, and sat inside. As he ate from his ration pack, he kept glancing at the child. The pod's glow filled the chamber with a soft blue light, almost comforting. He wondered who had placed the child here. Maybe a parent who had hoped that one day someone would find them. Maybe the last act of a dying civilization. Ryan felt a strange emotion rising in his chest, something between awe and sadness. Humans had seen many alien worlds, but rarely had they found anything that spoke so clearly of love and loss. He whispered softly, "Whoever you are, I promise I'll keep you safe." As he lay down to sleep, the pod pulsed slowly like a heartbeat in the dark. The sound was steady, calm, almost like breathing beside him. It was the first sound of life he had heard since landing on this dead world. During the night, the storm above cleared. The faint light from the surface filtered down through cracks in the rocks, shimmering across the walls. The crystals reflected it, filling the chamber with shifting colors. Ryan slept lightly, hand resting on his gear, mind full of questions. Far away, deep beneath the same planet, something ancient stirred. A signal had been awakened, one that had slept for centuries. Across the ruins, hidden machines began to blink to life, sending faint pulses through the ground. Queen Vera, the last ruler of the Terrashian people, opened her eyes for the first time in years. Her mind felt like smoke and fire, filled with the memories of war and the echo of a child's cry that had never left her. For ages, she had believed her offspring was lost forever. But now, faint and distant, she could feel a heartbeat that was not her own, a rhythm she knew by heart. Something, or someone, had touched the sleeping child of the Tirash. And far above, Ryan, unaware of what he had awakened, slept peacefully beside the small pod, unaware that the fate of 2 worlds had just begun to turn again. Deep under the crust of Tirash, where light had not touched for ages, the queen awoke. Her name was Vera, ruler of the ancient Terrashian race. Once she had commanded armies and built cities that shone brighter than stars. But all that was gone. Her people had fought a long war against another empire, and in the final days, she had lost everything, her home, her crown, and her child. Now she rose from the sleep of ages, surrounded by cold metal walls that hummed faintly with old power. Her body was tall and graceful, her skin pale silver with faint lines of blue light that traced across her arms. Her eyes, dark and glowing, opened slowly as her mind returned to her. She felt the weight of centuries, yet one thought burned through the fog of memory. The child. She reached out with her mind, using the old ways of her kind. The Terrashians were not only creatures of matter. Their thoughts could travel across energy and stone. For years her mind had drifted through silence, but now she felt a signal pulsing faintly through the planet's crust. It was weak and distant, but it was real. Her child lived. Vera rose to her full height. Her voice, when she spoke, echoed through the chamber. "Awaken the guards," she said. The machines around her responded, glowing brighter. From the shadows, tall figures stepped forward. Terrashian warriors, still loyal even after the ages of sleep. Their armor shimmered like crystal and metal fused together. "My queen," said the first guard. "What is your command?" Vera looked toward the ceiling, her eyes distant. "My child breathes again. Someone has touched the sacred vault." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. The vault was sealed long ago. None but the royal blood could open it. For it to awaken now meant an outsider had entered the sacred ground. Find who did this, the Queen ordered. Bring them to me alive. The guards bowed and moved out at once. Ancient transport halls stirred to life, their engines humming after centuries of silence. Across the ruined tunnels of Tirash, small patrol ships began to rise from the dust, spreading out in search of the intruder. Meanwhile, far above, Rian was still by the child's side. He had woken early, the cold air making his breath fog inside the helmet. The pod still glowed softly, and the readings showed improvement. The child was stable now. Rian stretched, ate a small breakfast pack, and checked his equipment. His energy cell was half drained, but it was enough to keep the pod alive for a while longer. He spoke softly while he worked. You must have been here a long time, he said to the child, though he knew it could not hear him. Maybe your family hoped someone would find you. The chamber remained quiet, but somehow it felt less empty. The air was warmer, the blue light gentler. Rian found comfort in it. He decided to explore the rest of the tunnel while keeping the pod close on his scanner. If there were other survivors, he might be able to help them too. He walked down one of the side passages. The walls were covered with alien symbols, lines of curved writing that glowed faintly when he passed his light over them. He recorded everything on his wrist device for the science team, though he doubted he would ever get the chance to send it. After a while, he found what looked like a control room. Old consoles and strange floating panels filled the space. When he touched one, it lit up, showing an image of the planet's surface marked by red zones. He guessed those were areas destroyed in the old war. Another screen showed lines of text, then an image of a woman holding a child. The woman's face was calm and strong, her eyes full of sorrow. Even through the alien shapes, Rian understood. This must have been the Queen. The child in her arms looked like the one in the pod. He felt a chill. So this is your mother, he whispered. He backed away from the console. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the Queen might still exist. The power running through this place was too deliberate to be random. Someone had kept these machines alive. Just then, his scanner beeped. Multiple heat signatures were moving through the tunnels toward him. They were large, too fast to be animals. Rian quickly ran back toward the main chamber. By the time he reached it, the air had changed. A soft vibration ran through the floor, and then a blinding light filled the room. Out of it stepped 3 tall figures, their armor glowing like crystal. Their movements were smooth and quiet. They carried long staffs that hummed with energy. Rian froze. His hand moved toward his sidearm but stopped. He remembered his mission: no violence, no mistakes. These were living beings. The first alien guard pointed the staff at him. "Human," a deep voice said, though the words came through a translation field that formed between them. "You are trespassing in the sacred vault of the Queen." Rian slowly raised his hands. "I didn't mean harm. I found the child. The life support was failing. I only tried to help." The guards looked at the pod. When they saw the child moving slightly inside, their eyes widened. They turned to one another, speaking quickly in their own tongue. Finally, the leader lowered his weapon slightly. "The Queen must see this," he said. 2 of them approached Rian. One took his scanner and gear, checking for threats. When they found none, they gestured for him to follow. Rian hesitated, but then looked at the pod. The guards carefully lifted it, holding it with reverence. "If you hurt the child, I will not let you take it," Rian said firmly. The leader looked at him with unreadable eyes. "The child is the Queen's heart. We will not harm it, come." They led him through a long tunnel lit by soft blue light. The wall shifted as if the structure itself was alive, opening paths as they walked. After a long descent, the passage widened into a great hall. At its center stood a massive throne made of shining crystal. On it sat Queen Vera. Her presence filled the room. She was beautiful and powerful, yet there was sorrow in her eyes. The guards knelt at her feet. Rian stood still, feeling small beneath her gaze. "Human," she said, her voice calm but cold. "You stand where none of your kind should be. Tell me, why are you here?" Rian swallowed, then stepped forward. "I came on a rescue mission. My ship crashed. I found the child in a chamber above. The system was failing. I gave it power to keep it alive." The Queen's expression did not change, but her eyes flickered toward the pod. When she saw her child breathing steadily, something broke inside her. Her fingers trembled slightly. "You touched the royal pod," she said, her voice softer. "Do you know what that means?" "I only knew it was alive," Rian answered. "I couldn't just leave it to die." The Queen rose from her throne. She moved with a grace that made the air feel heavy. "Your kind destroyed worlds for less than this," she said. "Yet you risked your life for one knot of your blood." "Why?" Ryan met her gaze. "Because no one deserves to die alone." "Not even here." The hall was silent. The guards shifted uneasily, waiting for her command. For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. Then she stepped closer and looked down at him. "There is truth in your voice," she said quietly. "Perhaps I judged your race too soon." She turned to the guards. "Prepare chambers for our guest. The child must be healed. I will see to it myself." The guards bowed and moved to carry the pod away. The Queen followed, her hand brushing over the shell gently. For the first time in centuries, warmth touched her face. The faintest smile passed her lips. Ryan watched as they left. He did not fully understand what had just happened, but he felt a strange connection forming. Something deep and ancient had shifted in this place. The guards led him to a small room lit by blue crystals. It was simple but peaceful. They gave him water and food that glowed faintly yet tasted sweet. Ryan thanked them. That night, as he rested, he thought of the Queen's eyes, powerful yet full of pain. He thought of the child who had begun to breathe again. Somewhere deep down, he hoped his presence here might bring some kind of peace to this broken world. Far above, the wind howled over the empty plains of Tirash. The stars shone faintly through the silver clouds. Beneath that quiet surface, two different lives, one human, one alien, had begun to change the fate of both their worlds. The chamber where Ryan slept was quiet. Soft blue light shimmered along the walls, reflecting off crystal floors. Outside, the vast halls of the ancient Tirashian palace stretched endlessly. Machines hummed faintly as they maintained life and security within the structure. Ryan could hear nothing except his own breathing and the low vibration of the pod containing the child. Morning came slowly. The light shifted, glowing brighter as the power systems adjusted to the day cycle. Ryan stretched and sat on the edge of the bed. His mind replayed the events of the previous day, the crash, the discovery of the child, and meeting Queen Vera. Each memory felt unreal, as if he were part of a dream rather than the center of a living alien civilization. He stood and walked to the door. A guard was waiting outside. The being was tall, its crystal-like armor shining faintly. Its eyes glowed softly, but there was a calm, disciplined air about it. "Human," the guard said in the translation field. "The Queen requests your presence." Rion nodded and followed. The hallway was wide and silent. The floor vibrated gently with the pulse of ancient energy, and the walls were decorated with carvings of Tirashian history, scenes of cities, forests, and stars. The images showed generations of people caring for one another, building and learning. Despite the ruin above ground, this underground palace preserved their culture perfectly. Finally, they reached a large room. At the center was Queen Vera, standing near the pod. Her child was awake now, tiny and fragile, but its glowing eyes followed her every movement. The Queen's expression softened as she watched her child. Her entire posture gentle, almost human in tenderness. "Sit," she said to Rian, pointing to a small platform opposite her. He obeyed, feeling both nervous and amazed. He was alone in a room with a being whose presence carried centuries of wisdom and power. He could feel the tension in the air as if the palace itself held its breath. "Human," the Queen began, her voice steady but curious. "You have risked much to save my child. Most of your kind would have ignored it or worse. Why did you act as you did?" Rian thought for a moment. "I have seen too many lives lost to war and carelessness. I have learned that survival is not just about staying alive, but about helping others when you can. This child was alive and I could help. That is why I acted." Vera's eyes narrowed slightly. She studied him carefully. Her people were taught to judge by strength, intelligence, and loyalty. Humans had never been tested against her kind in this way, and yet she sensed something different in Ryan, something that her people had not considered. He did not fight, he did not demand, and he did not hesitate to protect life that was not his own. "You do not fear my power?" she asked. Ryan shook his head. "I am a human, Your Majesty. Fear is natural, but I have learned that courage is more important than fear. I only want the child to live." The Queen looked at him for a long time. Then she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Perhaps I have been wrong to see all outsiders as enemies." She turned to the guards. "Prepare the child's chambers. Human. You will remain here and aid in its care until it is strong. You will not leave until I command it." Rian blinked. I am happy to help, he said. His heart raced. This was more than he expected. He had only intended to save the child, not stay in the palace of a queen who had ruled a mighty civilization. The guards lifted the pod carefully, moving it down a long corridor. Ryan followed, taking note of the architecture around him. Every surface reflected light in a way that made it seem alive. Vines of glowing energy climbed the walls, twisting through windows and machines, pulsing gently. It was a palace that had survived centuries, holding on to life even when the world above had died. The child's new room was small but welcoming. Soft crystal cushions lined the floor, and a low glowing lamp bathed the space in calm light. Ryan placed the pod carefully on a platform. He examined the life support systems, ensuring they were working perfectly. As the child awoke, it blinked its glowing eyes at him. Ryan knelt beside the pod and offered a gentle smile. "Hello there. You are safe now," he said softly. The child reached a tiny hand toward him. Its fingers glimmered faintly, almost like light. Ryan's hand hovered over the tiny hand, then touched it gently. The warmth of life seemed to flow through the connection, and Ryan felt a strange comfort. Vera entered the room quietly. She stopped at the doorway, watching him. There was a mixture of curiosity, caution, and hope in her gaze. "You are gentle," she said simply. Rian looked up. "I try to be," he said. The queen moved closer to the pod and touched her child. The child cooed softly and reached toward her. For the first time in centuries, the queen smiled fully. She held her child, feeling its life and strength. She looked at Ryan. "You have restored something I thought lost forever," she said. Ryan shook his head. "It was only small help," he said. "The real strength is yours." Vera studied him again. "No, your strength is different. You have shown care without expectation. That is rare." For days, Ryan remained in the palace, helping care for the child. He cleaned and monitored the pod, fed the child carefully, and observed its recovery. The queen occasionally spoke to him, learning about humans, their resilience, and their ability to rebuild despite suffering. Rian shared stories of Earth, how people recovered from disasters, helped one another, and learned from mistakes. Vera listened intently, her mind opening to new ideas. For centuries, she had lived in isolation, thinking that survival meant dominance. Now she saw something different in this human, a species that survived through kindness and courage. The child grew stronger with each passing day. Its eyes began to glow brighter, and its movements became more coordinated. Ryan was amazed by its intelligence, watching as it reached for objects and responded to his voice. The bond between human and alien child deepened. One evening, Vera called Ryan to the central hall. The palace was quiet, with only soft humming from the life support systems. She gestured for him to sit. "I must ask you," she said, "will you leave when the child is fully recovered?" Ryan shook his head. "I want to help until it is safe," he said. "I cannot abandon it now." Vera studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well. Stay as you wish. But remember, you are in my domain. You will obey the rules of the palace." Ryan smiled. "I understand, Your Majesty." For the first time, the queen felt a weight lift from her chest. She had been broken, filled with grief and loss, believing that her child and her people were gone forever. Now she saw hope, and it came from a human she had barely known. Days turned into weeks. Ryan and Vera worked together to strengthen the child. He taught it basic movements, introduced simple objects for interaction, and ensured it learned safely. Vera observed constantly, occasionally intervening with gentle guidance. The queen began to speak to Ryan more freely, asking about humans, their ways, and their values. She shared stories of her civilization before the war, her hopes for the future, and her fears about what could happen if they remained isolated. Ryan listened, offering encouragement and sharing lessons from his world. Slowly, the bond between the queen, her child, and the human deepened. Vera began to trust him, seeing that he genuinely cared for her child and her people. Ryan, in turn, respected her wisdom and authority, understanding the burden she carried. One evening, as the palace glowed softly under the crystal lights, the child reached for Ryan and smiled. Vera watched from a distance, tears in her eyes. She had been broken for centuries, and now she saw the light returning, not just in her child, but in her own heart. Ryan knelt beside the child, holding its tiny hands. "You are strong," he said softly. You will grow up safe. I promise. Vera stepped closer and rested a hand on his shoulder. You have done more than I could imagine, she said. Perhaps your kind is different than I believed. Ryan shook his head. We all have the choice to be kind or cruel. I chose kindness here. That is all. For the first time in centuries, the palace felt alive. The hum of ancient machines, the glow of crystals, and the soft laughter of a child filled the halls. Vera felt something she had not felt in her long life, a sense of hope. And in that moment, the queen realized that the human had not just saved her child. He had restored something far greater, the chance to believe again, to hope again, and to trust that life could continue beyond loss. The child slept peacefully that night, its breathing steady and strong. Ryan stayed beside the pod, watching over it as he had promised. Vera returned to her chamber, feeling the weight of her grief lighten. Outside, Tirash remained quiet, but within the palace, life and warmth had returned. A human had come to a broken world and shown that care, courage, and compassion could heal even the deepest wounds. The queen knew the journey was just beginning. The child would grow, the world could be rebuilt, and trust between human and Tirashian could flourish. But for now, she allowed herself to feel peace. For the first time in ages, the shadows of her heart had lifted and the palace glowed with a new light, a light that came from hope, care, and the unlikeliest of friends. Days passed in the underground palace of Tirash. Ryan had settled into a quiet routine. Every morning, he would wake early and check the child's vital readings. Then he spent hours helping the child practice simple movements, learning to grasp objects and responding to sound. The child's glowing eyes followed him everywhere, and its small hands reached out for him as if it already recognized him as a friend. Queen Vera observed silently from a distance. Her eyes followed Ryan's every action. She had watched countless warriors, advisors, and scholars pass through her halls over the centuries, yet she had never seen anyone like him. He did not demand respect or obedience. He did not challenge her authority. He simply cared. Each day she felt a shift inside herself. The weight of loss that had pressed down on her chest for centuries began to lighten. She had thought her heart could not mend. But seeing her child smile, reach for Ryan, and respond with trust, stirred something she had thought gone forever. One morning, the child sat upright in its pod. Its tiny fingers brushed against Rion's gloved hand. He smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said softly. "How are we today?" The child blinked its glowing eyes and made a soft sound. Ryan laughed quietly. "You're stronger already. Soon you'll be able to explore more of the palace." From across the room, Vera watched and felt a wave of emotion. Her child's life was being nurtured, not just preserved. It was safe and it was learning. Her hands had once held this child, yet she had never imagined it could live to see the world again. She approached Rion slowly. "You have done more than I could have hoped for," she said. "Even the elders of my time could not have kept my child alive under such conditions." Rion shook his head. "I only did what anyone should do. Life is life. We help where we can." Vera studied him, her eyes softening. She had been raised to judge by strength and authority. Yet here stood a human who had shown courage and care without power. "Your kind is full of contradictions," she said. Yet perhaps contradictions can be a strength. For the first time, Vera spoke to him as an equal rather than a ruler. "Tell me about your world," she said. "Teach me about your people and how you survive despite hardship." Ryan smiled. "We survive because we choose to care. Even when the world falls apart, we rebuild. We forgive, learn, and protect each other. That is how we grow stronger." The queen listened closely, her mind absorbing every word. For centuries, she had believed that strength came from power alone. Now she realized that there was another kind of strength, one that came from kindness, patience, and courage. Over the next several days, Vera allowed Rion to spend more time with the child. They moved the child from the pod onto soft cushions. Ryan taught it to crawl carefully, showing it how to reach for objects and respond to sounds. The child's eyes glowed brighter as it learned, and it giggled softly when Ryan tickled its tiny fingers. Vera watched quietly, her hand resting lightly on her chest. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness but of relief. Her child was alive, learning and laughing for the first time in centuries. A warmth she had not felt in ages spread through her heart. "Human," she said one evening, her voice gentle, "you have healed more than the child. You have healed something in me that I thought was gone forever. Ryan paused, unsure what to say. "I only did my duty," he said softly, "but I am glad to help." "You do not understand," Vera said. "For centuries I carried the pain of loss. I had built walls around my heart, thinking nothing could ever restore it. And yet here you are, a stranger, and you have shown me trust, care, and hope." Rion shook his head humbly. "I do not have special power, Your Majesty. I only act with my heart. That is all anyone can do." The Queen looked at him for a long time. In her eyes a faint smile appeared. "Perhaps that is the greatest power of all," she said. The days turned into weeks. Ryan and Vera formed a quiet partnership. While he focused on nurturing the child, she began to repair old systems in the palace, restoring energy and life to areas that had been dormant for centuries. Machines that once hummed only faintly now worked with renewed purpose. Lights shone in corridors that had been dark for ages. The palace seemed alive once more. As the child grew stronger, it began to explore its surroundings. Ryan carefully guided its movements, allowing it to crawl along the crystal floors and interact with the glowing vines that wound through the walls. Each new discovery brought laughter and wonder. Vera watched her child with a mix of awe and gratitude. One afternoon, the child reached toward Vera instinctively. Its tiny hand brushed hers, and she felt a surge of emotion. She knelt beside the child, holding it gently in her arms. "You are safe," she whispered. "I will never let anything harm you again." The child cooed and pressed its glowing cheek against hers. In that simple gesture, Vera felt the broken pieces of her heart begin to mend. She had believed that the past could never be undone. But here was proof that even after loss, life could flourish again. Ryan watched quietly from across the room. He felt a quiet joy in seeing the Queen's heart healing. He understood then that his presence mattered, not just for the child, but for the Queen as well. His actions had reminded her that trust and care could overcome grief. Over time, Vera began to speak more openly with Ryan. She shared memories of her people before the war, stories of love, friendship, and sacrifice. She told him of the great cities that had risen and fallen, of the knowledge her people had preserved, and of the mistakes that had led to their downfall. Ryan listened carefully, fascinated by the richness of her culture. He shared his own stories of Earth, of humans rebuilding after disasters, of families helping each other survive. Through their conversations, a bridge of understanding formed between human and alien. One evening, Vera led Rion to a high balcony overlooking the central chamber. The palace glowed softly under crystal lights, and the child played nearby. "Look at what has returned," she said. "Life, hope, and the possibility of a future. All of it because you acted without thought of reward." Ryan shook his head. "I only acted because it was right. But I am glad it helped." The Queen placed a hand on his shoulder. "You do not understand how much this means. For centuries I thought I had lost everything. Now I have my child, my palace, and the chance to rebuild. And I have learned that kindness can be stronger than fear, and care can be stronger than power." Rion smiled, humbled. "Then I am glad to have helped, truly." Days later, the child began to crawl across the floor on its own. Rion and Vera watched as it explored the room, touching walls and objects with curiosity. Every small milestone brought joy. Vera's laughter filled the hall for the first time in centuries, a sound Rion had never imagined he would hear. The palace seemed to breathe again. Lights shifted, machines hummed steadily, and energy flowed through the halls like a living river. Even the vines of glowing energy responded, twisting and pulsing in rhythm with life and warmth. Vera turned to Ryan one evening, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the palace. "You have given me more than life for my child. You have given me a reason to hope again. You have healed my heart, human." Ryan felt a quiet pride and humility. "It is not my heart alone that matters," he said. "It is the courage and trust of everyone here, the child, you, even the palace itself. Together we bring life back." For the first time in centuries, Queen Vera smiled fully, her heart unbroken and her mind open to the future. She held her child close, feeling its heartbeat, its warmth, and its trust. The brokenness that had defined her for so long was gone, replaced by hope, strength, and care. Outside, Tirash remained quiet and still. But within the palace, life pulsed strongly. A human had come to a broken world and shown that compassion, courage, and selfless care could mend even the deepest wounds. The Queen knew that this was only the beginning. Her people could rise again, her civilization could grow, and the child would one day lead with strength and wisdom. And as she watched Rion and her child together, she understood something profound. The future was brighter because of a human who had chosen to act with heart. That night, Farah stood in the central hall gazing at the glowing crystals and the sleeping child. A sense of peace and certainty filled her. For the first time in her long life, she knew that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, and that kindness could shape the future. Ryan rested nearby, ready to protect and guide the child. Together, human and Terrashian, they had begun a new chapter for a broken world. The shadows that had haunted the palace for centuries were gone, replaced with warmth, laughter, and the quiet power of hope. The palace of Tirash was alive with light. Crystals along the walls glowed softly, casting shimmering reflections on the polished floors. Machines hummed steadily, no longer dormant, and energy flowed through the halls like a river of warmth. Queen Vera walked with measured steps, holding her child gently in her arms. The tiny being had grown stronger, its glowing eyes bright and alert, its hands reaching for the world around it. Ryan followed quietly behind her. He had spent weeks helping the child recover, teaching it to crawl, explore, and respond to sounds. He had grown fond of the little being, feeling the same protective care he had felt when he first discovered the child. The queen stopped in the central chamber. Sunlight from the surface filtered down through cracks in the crystal ceiling, scattering in brilliant patterns across the floor. She set her child gently on the soft cushions and watched as it explored the room, curious and lively. "Look at it," she said softly. "It lives, it grows, and it learns. I had feared all hope was lost, but now I see the future again." Rian knelt beside the child, smiling as it reached for his hands. "You are strong and brave," he said. "Your future is full of possibilities." The queen studied Ryan closely. Her eyes reflected gratitude, awe, and something more, a deep respect. "Human, your presence here has done more than heal my child," she said. "You have restored my belief in hope. You have shown me that even in the darkest times, compassion can create light." Rian shook his head humbly. "I only did what anyone should do. You and your people carry the real strength. I just helped a little." Vera smiled faintly. "Perhaps your kind strength lies in that little, small acts of care that can change lives." For the next few days, life in the palace returned to a rhythm. Vera oversaw the restoration of the palace systems, activating areas that had remained silent for centuries. Rayon continued caring for the child, and the small being grew more confident each day. It crawled further, laughed softly, and began to recognize both Ryan and Vera as guides and protectors. One morning, the queen summoned Ryan to a high balcony overlooking the palace. From there, the full scale of the restoration was visible. The halls, once silent and dark, now glowed with light and energy. Crystal walkways reflected the sun's faint rays from the surface above. Machines that had been silent for centuries hummed with renewed life. The palace was no longer a monument of the past, it had become a living, breathing home once again. "You see it?" Vera asked, her voice calm but full of pride. "This is what hope can create. Life returns when care is given freely." Ryan nodded. "It is beautiful, and it is because you chose to trust, to heal, and to protect." Vera turned her gaze toward the child, now crawling across the floor toward them. It reached out for her, then glanced at Ryan and cooed softly. Vera bent down to lift it into her arms. She held the child close, feeling the warmth and the heartbeat against her chest. "This little life is a promise," she said, "a promise that my people can rise again, that our world can flourish, and that trust can be restored between beings who once fought and feared each other." Ryan smiled as he watched the bond between mother and child. He felt a quiet pride, knowing he had played a small role in this new beginning. Later that day, Vera called a council in the main hall. The remaining Terrashian elders, warriors, and guardians gathered. Many of them had never met a human before. When Ryan entered the hall, some were wary, but Vera stood and gestured toward him. "This human has done what none of us could," she said. "He found my child, saved it from harm, and helped it grow. He has shown us that life can be protected with care and courage, not only with power." The elders looked at each other, whispering softly. Some nodded in acknowledgement. Others studied Rion with cautious curiosity. He stepped forward and spoke simply. "I am grateful for your trust," he said. "I only acted to save a life. Your queen and her child are strong. They are the reason this world can be whole again. Together you can rebuild, learn, and grow. Vera placed a hand on her child who had begun to toddle toward her. She looked at Ryan and spoke clearly. Human, you may leave if you wish, but know that your kindness will never be forgotten. You have given us a gift beyond measure. You have returned the light to this world. Ryan looked at her and shook his head. I am honored, Your Majesty. I came as a visitor, but I will always remember what I have seen here. Your courage, love, and care have reminded me why life is worth protecting everywhere. The Queen smiled, and for the first time in centuries, she felt truly at peace. Her child played nearby, glowing with vitality and curiosity. The palace hummed with energy and life. The ruins of the old world above ground no longer seemed like a symbol of defeat. They were a reminder that even broken places could be healed. The next morning, Ryan prepared to return to his ship. He packed his supplies and checked the pod one last time. The child had grown strong enough to crawl, explore, and even respond to simple gestures. It reached out for him as if to say goodbye. Ryan knelt and took its tiny hand in his, smiling. You will grow strong, he said. You will protect this world and help your people flourish. Vera approached, her eyes full of warmth and gratitude. Thank you, human, she said. You have done more than you can imagine. You have given my child life, my people hope, and me the strength to rebuild. Ryan nodded humbly. It was my honor, he said softly. He lifted himself onto the small transport that would take him to the surface. Vera watched silently as he departed, her child waving its tiny hand. For the first time in ages, the Queen felt unbroken. The darkness that had shadowed her heart for centuries was gone. Once outside, Ryan looked back at the palace. The crystal walls shimmered in the sunlight. Energy pulsed through the structure, and the halls glowed brightly. He felt a deep sense of peace. He had not only saved a life, but had witnessed something extraordinary, the revival of an entire world through care, courage, and trust. As he ascended in his shuttle toward the horizon, the wind on Tirash's surface whispered softly through the ruins. The planet, once lifeless, now held promise. Its people had a chance to rebuild. Its queen had found hope, and a human had shown that kindness could bridge worlds. High above, Ryan's shuttle left the atmosphere. He looked down one last time, watching the glowing palace disappear into the distance. A smile touched his lips. Life had returned to Tirash, and he had been part of it. Far below, Vera held her child close, whispering softly, We will grow and we will rise again, and we will remember the human who brought us light. The palace pulsed with energy. The child giggled, and the Queen's heart beat strong and steady. Outside, the barren plains of Tirash seemed less lonely. The ruins no longer held only memory. They held the possibility of life, of care, and of hope. Vera looked to the stars. A new era had begun. She had learned that strength was not only power, but compassion. That courage was not only in battle, but in the willingness to act for others. And that even the smallest acts of care could heal broken hearts. The child toddled across the room, glowing with vitality. Vera followed, holding its hand, smiling. The Queen knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges. But with life restored, with trust regained, and with courage in the hearts of those who remained, Tirash had a future once more, and high above, Ryan watched the stars, knowing that somewhere on a distant planet, he had changed the course of a world, not with weapons or power, but with care, courage, and the simplest human gift, compassion. For the first time in centuries, the light of Tirash had truly returned. The world was no longer broken. Its queen, her child, and its people were alive again, and humanity had reminded them that even in darkness, hope could shine brighter than any shadow. The story of the broken queen, the human, and the lost child would be remembered for generations as a tale of courage, kindness, and the power of hope.